Welcome to Salute Your Sports. I believe we're on week 20, guys. We've made it to 20 weeks. We've got an exciting show. Tom Castleman, Drew Brackett, myself, Kamen Enchev. Breaking news, we're recording on a Tuesday today. Of course, we normally record Thursday. A few hours ago, the Tiger Woods car accident news coming down. It was a one-car accident. We'll have more on that later in the show. It does seem that Tiger is fine, but he is going to have surgery to his legs, looks like, so we don't know how that's going to affect his golf career. That could happen, but thankfully looks like he's going to be okay as far as no life-threatening injuries. But before we get to that serious topic, we're going to have a little fun. We're going to talk basketball. We're going to talk LA Laker basketball, which I personally really enjoy. Guys, Lakers 1-3 without Anthony Davis, who's been out the last 4 games. He's going to be out for another 3 to 4 weeks, according to reports. 3 losses in a row. Can King James lead the Lakers to a championship without a healthy Anthony Davis?
Yeah, for me, it's without Anthony Davis, no title for LA, coming as I'm sure you're going to elaborate with no shortage of verbiage at how amazing LeBron James is as a player. Anthony Davis is actually the guy that's the bigger matchup issue for pretty much every single team in the league. If you look at the series that they had with the Heat last year, you can have a player at the caliber of Jimmy Butler, for example. If we even look within the Western Conference, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, they can at least match up with LeBron James and, be a representative defensive option against him. With Anthony Davis, I can think of maybe 5 guys in the NBA that are even remotely qualified to do so. You have Giannis, KD certainly is somebody who could guard him. Bam Adebayo did a pretty decent job for the Heat last year on Anthony Davis, but most teams in the league don't have a guy that can match up with Anthony Davis. So I think he's actually the more important cog to a championship run than LeBron James, even if he's not necessarily the better player overall.
Well, I completely disagree with that before Drew speaks, because I will say this. In the NBA, great offense beats great defense. You mentioned Jimmy Butler in the Heat. Well, it was LeBron James who was the NBA Finals MVP, shot nearly 60%, nearly averaged a triple-double, right around 30 points per game. So I really don't think what you said is true, because you said that, Davis is a harder matchup problem. Well, we saw LeBron was actually the Finals MVP, and deservedly so.
But
I can see what you're going with, but I think you'd have a hard time arguing that Anthony Davis is more important to the Lakers' success than LeBron James. I mean, after all, Anthony Davis wasn't winning anything before he teamed up with LeBron James. We've seen LeBron James make the finals on his own in the past with Cleveland, literally no one on his team.
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
I don't
who is Anthony Davis playing with?
Matchup-wise, but you can't honestly sit here and tell me that Davis is more important to the Lakers' championship run than LeBron.
I'm not saying that he's more important. I'm just saying that without Anthony Davis, the Lakers aren't going to be on a championship run. That's all.
That's fair. What do you think, Drew?
No, I agree. LeBron James, 36 years old, he played 43 minutes in an overtime game against the Wizards in the loss. I mean, if he's going to be doing this every game, he's going to get tired. But the 3-game losing streak, a little bit concerning. All 3 games were at home. They were against the Nets. Nets are a quality team. You can't explain the Heat game or the Wizards game, and those were close losses for the Lakers. But Tom's right. I mean, Anthony Davis is an important part to this Laker team, and without him, I'm not sure they win a championship.
I struggle with this question. I will say this to you, though, something that, and I'll ask you guys this question, assuming Dennis Schroeder is healthy, I think he's a very underrated piece, because LeBron James and Schroeder are the only point guards on the Lakers roster. LeBron's a small forward, but he's really a point forward. And Dennis Schroeder has been out during that 3-game losing streak. That's part of it. And you look at the games, Drew, you talk about the Nets and Heat. How do you explain those losses away? Well, or not the Nets. The Nets was explainable, but the Wizards and Heat. You look at the Wizards, they've won like 5 in a row right now. The Heat have won like 3 or 4 in a row, or 3 of the last 4. These two teams are playing very good basketball, and those were 2- and 3-point games. So I'm not saying Dennis Schroeder is amazing, but in a 2- or 3-point game scenario, I'm pretty confident had they had Dennis Schroeder, they probably win those 2 games without Anthony Davis, because they did win with Schroeder that first game when Davis wasn't there. He's a guy that averages 14 points and 4 assists. That's pretty solid as a third scorer and second assist guy on the team. He's been playing very good defense as well. So I think in close games, I think he does matter for them. And I think, for me, I think of it this way. Without Anthony Davis, I think the Lakers can absolutely get to the finals with LeBron James with a healthy roster. I don't think they might win the finals, though, so that's where I might agree with you guys. But I think the Lakers I trust them much more than the Clippers. We've got playoff P. Paul George, who is just a choke fest waiting to happen come the playoffs. These guys lost Montrezl Harrell, who was their third best player arguably last year, to the Lakers themselves. And the Lakers have, Harrell, they have Gasol, they have, LeBron, all these playoff guys, that have played on their team. So I think they can win in the West without Anthony Davis. I think we've seen the Nuggets and Mavericks have taken a step back. The Suns, I don't know if they're quite ready to win. The Jazz, again, I haven't seen those teams win. I think none of those teams, the Clippers have never even made the finals. So I think the Lakers can get to the NBA Finals with LeBron James only and not Anthony Davis. I don't think they're going to beat the Nets, though, in the finals without Anthony Davis. With Davis, I like the Lakers. Without, though, that comes down to it where at that point the Nets have 3 of the top 4 players on the court in that game.
Yeah, like you said, with Schroeder being back, the Lakers having a mostly healthy roster, even if Davis isn't able to go, they're still a very formidable team out in the West. I think they kind of fall back to the pack a little bit. It's easy to look at all these other teams out in the West, and say like, well, we haven't seen them win. Well, that's because for the past however long it's been, Golden State for about 4 years running it. Like, a lot of these teams are really talented, just as we haven't seen them in the finals because they're going up against a juggernaut team with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant, and then LeBron James and Anthony Davis teaming up. I think that's kind of why we haven't seen some of these Western Conference teams really take that next step. This affords them an opportunity to do so. Now, the Lakers are a much more beatable team without their second best player on the roster. So at the very least, it'll be really, really compelling to see. We've gone from kind of like the Lakers being the de facto Western Conference representative to, reaching the Western Conference Finals. Maybe even that's a little bit in question, depending on matchup, depending on who's hot over a 7-game series. If there's no Anthony Davis at all, right, I think he'll be back in time for the playoffs. I don't think that's out of the question. So I'm not hitting the panic button on the Lakers whatsoever.
Well, and that's I just want to make it clear this is our hypothetical situation, because they are saying Anthony Davis should be back in about a month, and they probably could have rushed him back even sooner. They want to take their precautions with him.
Yeah, they have no need to.
Most likely Davis is going to be there. This isn't going to be an issue. I just thought it's kind of timely with a 3-game losing streak without him being there. I do think one thing that's very interesting that Drew brought up is LeBron's minutes. I think there's all sorts of things people have been calling for, like LeBron to rest, and LeBron is sick of that. He wants to play. He's invested like $1 million into his body in the off season, and he's made a point that he wants to play every game, and he doesn't mind playing 43 minutes in an overtime game against the Wizards. So I think that's great, and I think he looks as good as ever. It doesn't look like it's slowing him down. You can argue maybe by the playoffs he'll be tired, but I don't know. He's been doing this for years. Until we see him take an actual clear step back, I'm not talking about like a 1/4, 10% step back, a clear step back, because there was some statistic last year or the year before, LeBron James was averaging more dunks per game than any other year of his career. So he looks pretty spry. The interesting thing to me, though, is Davis is expected to come back by about March 25th, maybe a week before. That's the NBA trade deadline. So my thinking is if they don't think he's healthy, maybe they're more willing to pull the trigger on a trade to make their team better. But I think if you're the Lakers, I think the only team that scares you right now is, quite frankly, the Nets. I don't think they're scared by anyone in the West. Tom, you talked about these teams not having played, because of the Warriors and Lakers. But, I mean, the Clippers, I think we can agree the Clippers had more talent than the Nuggets. So the fact that they couldn't get by the Nuggets leading 3-1 in that series was quite disappointing. And I think they're the biggest challenger to the Lakers. And I think there's a lot of question marks over in L.A. and whether they can get it done in the postseason when we're looking at the Clippers.
I mean, you're looking very far ahead, and my concern is when are the Lakers going to win another game? Wednesday at Utah, that's a loss. They are heavy underdogs in that contest. Friday, home against Portland. Portland is the 5 seed right now in the West, and then they have against Golden State. Golden State is what? The 8th seed, and then they have after Golden State, who do they have? They have against Phoenix. And Phoenix is like the 4 seed. And then finally they'll probably pick up a win against the Kings, but that's on March 3rd.
I wouldn't worry about that. I think LeBron James comes out with a 40-point game and shuts up the Utah Jazz on Wednesday. If we're sure not the Jazz, I think the Lakers definitely will beat the Blazers at home. So I'm not that worried about this being a long losing streak. And quite frankly, I don't know if we're going to have full fans come the playoffs or whatnot, but I think LeBron James has won as a 2 seed before. He's so good and he's so seasoned that team, I don't know that they even need the 1 seed to roll through the playoffs. I would feel pretty good about the Lakers. I think part of what it comes down to is, can you beat this team in a 7-game series? It's so different when you match up each night, every player. Because, I mean, we look at a couple years ago, the Boston Celtics and the Cavaliers were in the Eastern Conference Finals, LeBron's last season in Cleveland there, without Kyrie Irving. The Celtics had a much, much better roster than the Cavaliers at the time. But to beat LeBron James over a 7-game series is very, very hard to do. I think you have to be clearly more talented, and I think the only team that is clearly more talented, even without Davis, to me, is probably the Nets. But that brings me to my next question, guys. We spoke about Anthony Davis. We talk about the Nets, their big 3 with Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. We talked about Paul George, a number 2 to Kawhi Leonard over with the Clippers. I'm guessing you guys are all going to say Anthony Davis. I mean, do we agree that he's the best number 2 option in the NBA? And if we do, maybe we should say who is the number 2 best number 2 option, or the number 3. Who are the best Robins to Batman, the Scottie Pippen to Michael Jordan? Who are some of the guys that you really look at as that second option that can help a team win a championship?
Well, first off, I mean, I think Davis is more of a 1B to LeBron's 1A than he is a straight up, second best player on the team overall. I mean, they play very different positions. It's not like we were looking at Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen where they're both wing players. They both do. I mean, with the NBA, it's getting more and more positionless. But I mean, you look at Anthony Davis and how his peers and how front offices thought of him before the season. He was a top 10 player in the NBA. So really to kind of call him like, the best 2 player in the league, it's a little bit unfair because he's one of the best 10 players in the league, just period.
Maybe 5.
I think, yeah, maybe top 5. I think that, if you gave him a Robin type player, it'd be really interesting to see where he goes. I mean, you look at his career so far and he didn't have a whole lot of success down in Louisiana with having some second options. Maybe Jrue Holiday was the best option, DeMarcus Cousins for a little bit of time. I'm going to exclude Brooklyn because I think the same thing. They also have a bunch of 1 players with Harden and Durant. But I really like what's going with Denver and the Nuggets. You look at Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, and they're kind of more of that Stockton-Malone type of thing. where, they kind of alternate who's the best guy. But I think it pretty much is Jokic. He's really put himself into the MVP race as the one. And then Jamal Murray as a two is a perfect complement for what they do out in Denver. So I would take probably Murray as like a great second player to a great first player in terms of how they complement each other's games.
I did not expect that.
Interesting. Yeah, I like
to
that.
Be interesting.
No, I like that. But you know what? I really want to go just throw out something that Common is just going to hate. That's kind of what I want here. So I'm going to go with the Wizards. Bradley Beal averaging about 32 points per game. And then you have Russell Westbrook, a guy who's averaging almost 20 points per game, 9.5 rebounds, 9.5 assists. He can do it all in the Wizards right now on a 3-game winning streak. So you got to love everything about what they're doing. And this is a Wizards team, very low expectations heading into this season, but the addition of Russell Westbrook has really been important for this team.
Yeah, you went right for it. You went right for my least favorite player in the league. Let me ask you two questions, two follow-up questions.
Sure.
What is Russell Westbrook's field goal percentage? Do you have it pulled up?
Not sure. I don't have it pulled up. That's not a very important stat, so we'll just live without that one.
All right, well, I'm going to pull up Russell Westbrook's field goal percentage. And
now
Tom,
you've done it, Drew.
Let me ask you
now
what
I've
you
done
think about Drew's BS.
What do you want to ask me about Drew's?
What do you think about Russell? So he's saying Russell Westbrook is number 2 to Bradley Beal. Do you buy Russell Westbrook?
Do you think Russell Westbrook's number 1 to Bradley Beal?
Well,
this is a very interesting take from Common.
Scoring, man.
Common with the interesting take that Russell Westbrook could be the one option in Washington, and Beal's the second guy. I like the heel turn here. No, I mean, as far as what they're looking to do, that's a team that has a bunch of young talent that's not really really proven yet. And Russell Westbrook seems to actually kind of play well with that type of talent. Not my first pick, but certainly not far-fetched as being a quality second option on a team.
All right, so here's the stat breakdowns for Russell Westbrook, as I call him. 42% from the field, 29% from 3.
Not a three-point shooter.
4.9 turnovers a game, 61% from the free throw line. So, yeah, just as I've constantly said to you off air, I don't think it's come up on this show, but Russell Westbrook is quite possibly the most overrated player in the history of basketball, perhaps the history of sports. I mean, you look at this guy, he's a 43% career shooter, roughly 30% from 3, gets about 4 to 5 turnovers a game. I mean, he's so incredibly inefficient. Well, yeah, if you get the ball and you run around with the ball the whole game, sure, you're going to put up numbers. But he's a guy that's a turnover, a missed shot waiting to happen. He doesn't run his teams well, and that's why we see every team that he leads, we see how much they improve. They flipped him for Chris Paul. The Thunder were much better with Chris Paul than they were with Russell Westbrook as their point guard, as evidenced by their record. So, I mean, I know you're just throwing that out there to bug me, but you know what? It is bugging me because I just want people to know how truly overrated Russell Westbrook is as a basketball player. You got to look at field goal percentage. You got to look at turnovers. It's easier to put up numbers when your numbers are high. My take on this question, I'm very conflicted. So first off, I'm going to give you a few honorable mentions, a couple names you guys haven't mentioned.
Embiid and Simmons.
Probably should. That's one, but I'm getting lower and lower on Simmons. The one that I think people need to mention is Jaylen Brown for the Celtics. Actually, of any number 2 scorer in the NBA, he's first scoring option, 25.5 points per game. Jason Tatum only about a half point more a game. So, again, this is more of a 1A, 1B scenario, as Tom mentioned, with LeBron and Davis. Also, C.J. McCollum, a guy that's been putting up over 25 points per game when healthy. He's got to be up there as Damian Lillard's number 2. I think certainly if Klay Thompson was healthy, you talk about fit, that was a perfect fit. Klay played defense on the perimeter, and he was a clear number 2. Wasn't one of those deals where they have to fight for the number 1 spot. I think the guy that I also think is overrated is Paul George, just because we see him meltdown in the playoffs. I mean, the guy can't buy a bucket when it comes to crunch time. I did like Jamal Murray. I actually didn't have him written down on my list. However, he was amazing in the playoffs. He hasn't quite taken a step forward as much as I would like to see him take. For me, it comes down to 2 guys. It comes down to Anthony Davis, and it comes down to James Harden. And I think I might just go a little different route than you guys. I think I might go James Harden here. And I think what makes Harden a great number 2 option is because he's so willing to adapt. Harden is one of the most unique players in the history of the NBA. I got to look this up, but I believe that probably Harden and LeBron James are the only 2 guys that have ever led the league in scoring and led the league in assists. Harden led the league in assists in the 2016-17 season. Then he was a scoring champ 3 years in a row. And I think what makes his game so special is he can be a point guard or a shooting guard. And that's what we've seen with the Nets. He's really adapted his game, and he's averaging 11.4 assists per game while he's with the Nets. That's the highest in the NBA because season average 11.1, also the highest in the NBA. But what we've seen from James Harden is just how hard he had it in Houston. There was so much on his shoulders there that it was hard, and that's why he got tired come the playoffs, because he was asked to be the man and he was asked to do so much. This season, what have we seen with his efficiency? Since he's been on the Nets, he's shooting 50% from the field, 41% from 3. Both of those are career-high marks for James Harden. Still scoring about 25 a game, but doing it more efficiently, 11 assists a game. He said, you know what, KD, you can be the leading scorer. Kyrie, you can be number 2. I'll be number 3, and I'll dish out all the assists. But he can also be number 1. We saw a game against the Suns. The Nets trailed the game by a lot. They came back. That was a game without Harden, or rather, no Kyrie, no KD. Harden was the man scoring 38 points. So I think you got to bring up James Harden. I do agree with you, Tom, what you're saying about Davis and Harden kind of being 1B. Mm-hmm. But for the sake of the argument, Anthony Davis is the second best player on his team. James Harden is the second best player on his team. So I'm going with the question, and I'm going to say they're a virtual tie, but I think a lot of people might go with Anthony Davis as the clear answer. I really got to throw James Harden in the mix, and I've been very impressed with what he's doing in Brooklyn. And it's a guy that really, quite frankly, for a guy that led the league in scoring the last 3 years, he's kind of underrated. Like, you look at ESPN's top 10 list of players, he was like number 7 or 8 on ESPN's top 10 players. And, again, I've said this a lot on the show and off the show. I think I look at 2 through 7, 8, all those guys are about even. But if I was forced to pick, I have a hard time putting a back-to-back-to-back scoring champ who was the assist leader the year before as the number 7 basketball player in the world. I think we got to give this guy his due, and it's because he hasn't won in the playoffs. And part of it has been his fault. That's the next evolution in his game. But part of it is it's hard to do it yourself when you're on a bad team. I mean, not everyone is LeBron James, superhuman.
Yeah, it doesn't help when you miss 28 straight threes.
Yeah, well, that did happen against the Warriors in Game 7, I believe. Was that 2017, 2018?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Tom, what you were going to say?
Oh, just that it's really incredible how that's meshing so well in Brooklyn. I know that was a really big concern when that deal was made, and I personally still have some worries on the defensive end. I know offense is what wins championships, especially in the NBA, and offensive talent does too. I just worry about if a team knows that they can go up against you and get a bucket anytime they want going down the court, it puts a lot of pressure on your offense. So far it's going really well. Fingers crossed it'll keep going well into the playoffs.
I mean, thankfully they have 3 solid options. So.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, more than solid. Actually, Kyrie Irving is probably having his best season yet. If you look at his efficiency and some of the shot making he's had. The Nets, by the way, in the last few games have beaten the Lakers, they've beaten the Jazz, and they've beaten the Clippers, and that was without Kevin Durant. So those guys are rolling over there in Brooklyn, and that's been the MO this season, even earlier in the season, even before Harden. They beat the Bucks also. They've beaten all the good teams. Ironically, where they've struggled is against some of the bad teams. When maybe they lose focus, they play down to their competition. But, man, come the playoffs, the Nets are a scary team.
As the guy who picked them to win it all, I am very much looking forward to that.
Well, I had the Lakers. I am very much looking forward to that.
You need Davis to come back.
Drew probably had the Bucks just to upset us.
Likely. Very likely.
No, Drew had Lakers too.
Oh, I did have the Lakers. Okay.
Yeah, I was the one that went counter on that one.
Okay. Well, all those guys are great options. I think Harden, it's not fair. You're right. Like having James Harden as the number 2 option or Anthony Davis as the number 2 option, quite frankly, isn't fair. But that's the way the league is played right now. That's why, you win with 2 or 3 stars. That's how the league is now. And you know what? That's not anyone's fault for doing that. That's just simply how it is. Back in the day, they weren't constructing teams like that. Certainly you had the Lakers with Magic and Kareem at one point. I guess the Celtics had Bird and McHale, but still, for the most part, you weren't constructing super teams. It's just how the league has changed. That's not LeBron's fault. That's not Durant's fault. It just used to be the stars were more spread out back in the day. You simply can't win without just one star in the modern-day NBA. That's why I think the Utah Jazz aren't going to win the championship, because they can have the regular season success, but they need the second star. It's the same thing we've seen with Giannis in Milwaukee. He hasn't won because he doesn't have that second star. All due respect to Chris Middleton, very good player, but we're talking about NBA first-year type player. You need 2 superstars to win the ring. I know the Heat had an unprecedented run, but they came up short. So, anything else to add, Drew Brackett?
I'm good.
Want to do college hoops, Tom? You ready for some college hoops?
I am looking forward to some college hoops. It's been the same 2 teams that we've had at the top of the rankings all season long, still undefeated, with the Gonzaga Bulldogs and the Baylor Bears. We are approaching conference tournament season, which means March Madness is not too far behind. So we kind of got to start thinking about who looks like an early perennial favorite for winning the title. Are we sticking with a couple of the teams that have kind of been there all along, or we've seen some really strong play out of some unexpected teams throughout the season? Perhaps does the field stand a little bit of a better chance?
Yeah, so let me pose the question exactly how I had written down. We'll start with Drew Brackett on this one. So the question I have written down, 22-0 Gonzaga, 17-0 Baylor. They've been 1-2 the whole season. Would you guys take, as the NCAA tournament champ, would you take either Gonzaga or Baylor, or would you take the field?
That's a tough one. March Madness is just so unpredictable, and crazy things happen every year. That's the beauty of it. And we've seen in past years some pretty heavy favorites. I remember the Zion year. A lot of folks picked Duke, and they lost in, I don't remember what round. But we've seen that happen. Sweet 16. We've seen that happen, but I'm not sure it's going to happen this year. Gonzaga's just clicking on all cylinders. Baylor hasn't played in quite a bit of time, so obviously playing Iowa State tonight, the Bears should get back on track, but we'll just see how they look after not having played a game since basically the beginning of February.
Yeah, let me give you some of the statistics. As you guys know, I love the stats, just the pure dominance we've seen from these teams. By the way, what's incredible about Gonzaga being 22-0 and Baylor being 17-0, that's 39 games this season and not a single close game that's gone down to the last possession. Gonzaga's closest game was a 5-point win over West Virginia on a neutral court. Of course, that's a top 20 team in West Virginia. And that's a game that Jalen Suggs, I actually watched that game. Their star freshman point guard got injured during the game, so that kind of hurt their rhythm. He came back in the game, and the Zags pulled out the win. Every other win has been by double digits, most of them by 30-plus. And, yes, I know they play an easier schedule, but they have challenged themselves a little bit. They won by 12 points over Kansas, 11 points over Iowa, just pure dominance. And then Baylor on the other side, by the way, 17-0. They've beaten number 5 Illinois by 13. Now number 7 Oklahoma by 15. Texas Tech and Kansas by 8. Texas by 14. Another team in the top 20. And those 8-point wins over Kansas and Texas Tech, those were the closest games they played. So they haven't even had as close of a game. So it's just been absolutely sheer dominance by these teams. And they're just so good on offense, it's scary. Gonzaga's averaging 93 points per game. That is like unheard of in college basketball, except for like VMI or something, one of those teams a few years back that all they did was run and gun and play offense. But of an actual team that plays like teams, 93 points is a lot. That's top in the nation. Timmy and Kispert, they have a few guys, both averaging about 19 a game, shooting over 50% from the floor, over 40% from three. Jalen Suggs at point guard, 14 a game, also over 50%. So much balance, so many guys that can score. Baylor on the other side is a fantastic three-point shooting team, 44% from three. And they've got multiple juniors and seniors, great guard play. I don't see any way that we don't at least see one of those teams win the championship, because I think it's nearly impossible for both of them to slip. I think it's possible one gets upset, but I think at least one of them will make the championship game. And if it's a one-off scenario, I'm going to take one of those teams. In fact, I'd argue, guys, that I'm about 51% sure that that'll be our national championship. And if you want to make some cash, like a decent bet might be to bet Gonzaga versus the field and then bet Baylor versus the field. Hedge your bet. That way you should come out with a profit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to give me the top two teams in the country against the field, I'm going to go ahead and take the top two teams. I mean, I'm assuming that neither of them are really going to slip in conference play very much, that they're going to cruise right through and be the number 1 and 2 teams in the tournament, which means they're going to be on opposite ends of the bracket. So if you give me, Gonzaga on one side, Baylor on the other, I'm like you, Colin. I feel very confident that at least one of them is going to make it all the way. I mean, you look, you covered it really, really well. They all have depth. They all have scoring. They all have defense. That's pretty much all you need to win, really. So I definitely would take Baylor Bears and the Gonzaga Bulldogs as the two favorites for the title versus the entire field. There've been some good upstarts. The Michigan Wolverines have been playing exceptionally well. I think Ohio State, Illinois, I think they're also top 5 ranked. I don't know if they've updated the rankings after the weekend, but Big Ten is really showing out. Big Ten is showing out, and they could definitely be, a team or a pair of teams that, kind of ruin the dance a little bit for the presumptive number 1 and 2 teams. But, I'll take them against the field.
Do you think that will be the championship? Because I think it's going to be the championship. Like, would you bet on both of them making it? Because, like I said, I'm leaning towards saying that we're going to see that, because I think they're so much better than everyone else. A couple of stats of the teams in the top 10 in college basketball. I think Villanova has 3 losses, but the rest all have 5 or 6 losses. So minus Michigan, who's 16-1. So I mean, a lot of these other top teams have 5 or 6 losses. I mean, I think they're so far ahead, given especially the experience they have, the guard play. I think the one team that's a little more vulnerable, I'd say, is Baylor, because they rely so much on their three-point shooting. But, man, when you're shooting 44% as a team from 3, they have Jared Butler, Teague, and Mitchell. I mean, these guys are all near that over 40% three-point range. So that's dangerous.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but for me, the college basketball tournament is less about, how a team's performed over the course of the season and how they're performing in a tournament. We've seen countless numbers of teams that, have several losses that get in as a bit of a lower seed or or perhaps like we're a preseason really well-ranked team have a dip, but then they come out of it towards the end. I mean, with COVID and everything this year, and games being canceled and rescheduled, I mean, college basketball is difficult enough as a student athlete with the schedule to be consistent, and it's only one game. It's not a full series like it is in the NBA. So I would say I don't think that's necessarily going to be the matchup. I'm not 51% sure, to put it that way. I could easily see, Michigan or Illinois or Ohio State giving work to one of these teams in a sweet or a Final Four game, and maybe, that's how it happens. I don't necessarily see an early round upset, but once you start getting into those elite matchups in the 8 and the 4, then it's a little less assured, I think.
I like Illinois and Iowa, by the way, as two teams making a deep run. Illinois has fantastic guard play, and they have a big guy down low. Iowa's got a three-point shooter, and Luka Garza, probably the top player in college hoops. So those are my two teams. I know they're both in the top 10, but I think they're ranked like 5th and 7th or 8th, whatever Iowa is now. Those are the teams that I would look as potential teams to beat these teams.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty tough this year. I don't know if we'll have another 16-1 upset, but I think there'll be plenty of upsets to go around come the NCAA tournament.
I'm looking forward to talking sleeper teams. I think 2 weeks from in 2 weeks' time, our show will be our March Madness predictions, or I guess maybe that would be 3 weeks' time. I think 2 weeks' time is before Selection Sunday. But we're gonna have plenty on that. I mean, Michigan's the other team that's 16-1, but they're averaging about 79 points per game. They don't have the firepower of 93 a game for Gonzaga, 87 a game for Baylor. I don't think Michigan is quite going to have that firepower, but I think we're going to see a lot of upsets, definitely, but I don't think we're going to see either of these top two teams get upset just because they have so much balance. I think sometimes, Drew, you brought up the Zion year. As good as Duke is, a lot of that team was relying on Zion and who was the other guy?
R.J. Barrett.
R.J. Barrett.
That's right. So it was Zion and R.J. Barrett were kind of the two guys carrying the team. The depth that the Zags and Baylor have, they may not necessarily have a number 1 overall pick, although I will tell you this, if you've looked at the draft boards, some of those Gonzaga players are really getting really high in the draft boards. They've got two guys that might go lottery, actually, which is crazy to think about. Not Adam Morrison, but two other guys. And I could willing to bet that those guys will be better players than Morrison was in the NBA. And I think this could be a good year for Gonzaga because we saw them a couple years ago finally reach the championship game. This might be the year where they finally win the championship game. So that's what me and Tom picked in the preseason, by the way. We had Gonzaga winning it all. I don't remember what Drew had. He might have had Baylor. He might have had Kansas because he's a Mizzou grad that likes to pick Kansas. We're not really sure who he went with. We'll have to.
Why didn't you guys pick Mizzou?
Because you know what I said about Mizzou on this show? Both of you picked Mizzou to win the SEC. I picked Tennessee. Certainly did not see Alabama coming out of nowhere the way they did. But I said this about Mizzou. Mizzou is too inconsistent. They don't have enough three-point shooting, and you never know what's going to happen with those guys. They got off to such a hot start. Why? Because they had juniors and seniors, mostly seniors. Given the COVID, it's much easier for an experienced team to come out of the gates hot. But what we've seen them kind of get back to reality. They have one of these amazing games, then they have a bad game. Good stretch, bad stretch. I don't see them putting together 4 or 5 games in a row where they can make the Final Four. But tease for later in the show, I do see them winning big tonight, though. So we'll have more on that later in the show.
Certainly will be exciting stuff. Well, we've had a lot of fun on the show so far, but we would be remiss if we didn't touch on at least a little bit some of the more sobering news that we have in the cast today. Earlier today, Tiger Woods in a single vehicle accident Right now, I think he's currently in surgery. Last I checked, I've been keeping loose tabs on updates on his status. My understanding is right now he is in serious condition. I don't think he's necessarily critical, so I'm not going to commit to that.
Yeah,
but has suffered multiple
non-life-threatening injuries, but he is having surgeries to both of his legs, from what I've seen. Again, there's a lot of information still to be out. There might have been stuff that came out during our show, so we're not going to speculate too much. I've actually seen some coverage online where people are speculating like crazy. I think it's one of those times where it's best to reserve judgment, but it's just the latest thing, in a series of crazy things that have happened to Tiger Woods over the years. I mean, you look at 2008, this guy had 14 majors and looked like pretty much a shoo-in to pass up Jack Nicklaus's 18 majors. He was probably maybe not only the most dominant golfer in the world, but perhaps the most dominant athlete in the world, certainly in the conversation. He was making cuts left and right. He won like several majors in a row at one point, which is unheard of in golf because you're going up against literally how many golfers enter a major? Like 100 or something, Drew? Is there a number?
Yeah, I mean, it depends which major, but yeah, I mean, there's at least 100, sure, 120.
And it all kind of went downhill. And I remember this. We were a freshman in college, and that's when all of this stuff kind of happened. Like 2009, the big scandal came out where he had, again, it was like a car incident where like his wife pulled him out, and like it turned out that he had like multiple sex scandals with multiple women, got divorced to his wife, and then he had the DUI in 2017, and he's had so many injuries, so a lot going on in his personal life, also a lot going on with his health. Then he had that major 2019 Masters comeback when he won the Masters. So, I mean, it's just been so many things have happened with Tiger Woods in his personal life, and we've seen it's translated to golf. Certainly he gets older, that's part of it, but his golf game has really gone downhill in the last 11 years or so. Guys, what do we think of Tiger Woods and just everything that's happened on the course and off the course? Does it take away from sort of his greatness and his mystique? Because beyond the fact that he's a great player, I think a lot of people thought of him as kind of like a role model type figure, and he lost a lot of his sponsors after the sex scandal and subsequent activities.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, a fan or an observer's ability to compartmentalize. I mean, for me, his golf greatness is his golf greatness. For a stretch there, I've never proclaimed myself to be a huge golf fan, but for a large stretch of my life, there was one golfer and one golfer only that I knew. But you could bet that I knew about him. And like you said, he was just dominant for such a long period of time. And then, for multiple reasons, and there, I'm sure, are plenty of documentaries and reportings on his personal life. I mean, that's unfortunately the price that he's paid for being as famous as he is. There's a lesson to be learned in there about, how we view, great athletes, great entertainers across different entertainment industries as role models. And it's very easy to say that until you kind of get the curtain pulled back on you. If that's how you are in your personal life. Any number of athletes have had less than ideal personal lives, less than, the pedestal that we like to put them on as observers. So for me, it's easy to compartmentalize and say amazing golfer, I think the greatest of all time, even if he doesn't have the most majors. But that's completely separate from personal life, where he's certainly been less than exemplary.
Yeah, I agree. It is easy to, find the difference between his on-the-course Tiger and then off-the-course Tiger. And, of course, we see the most on-the-course Tiger. I mean, this is a guy who, one of the only golfers ever to have an advantage before he even hit the ball. He was standing there on the tee, and the other guys were intimidated. So that's just something that is special and doesn't happen very often. If it's ever really happened. But yeah, off the field or off the course, yeah, he's not the role model that some want him to be, but he is who he is, and wish all the best for him. Hopefully he's okay and can still continue to golf.
Is he the greatest golfer ever to you? So real quickly, the numbers: Jack has 18 majors, Tiger has 15. Tiger does have 82 tour wins, which is tied for the most ever, nine ahead of Jack on that stat. I think it's safe to say at this point he's not going to equal Jack's record, especially, hopefully everything is okay with this knee surgery. Again, more things, leg surgeries, more things need to come out. But even if it goes, smoothly the way we think it is, he might have a hard time getting that major record. If he doesn't get to that record, I mean, are you comfortable saying he is the best golfer ever still?
I mean, I am. I mean, you think about it's a lot about like the mystique. It's a lot about how the game has changed and how he really changed the game. I mean, has anybody ever Nicklaus proofed a course before? I mean, we've heard about Tiger proofing courses, all the time. I think that this is one of the instances where the totality of numbers of championships doesn't necessarily equate to the greatness of an individual. I mean, we don't really consider Bill Russell to be the greatest NBA player of all time, despite him winning 11 titles.
This is
I'm aware, but I'm saying, like, if you were to put them like in their prime head to head, who would you pick? I'm going with Tiger. Like that's what makes it. I can answer that question really easily, which to me makes him the best golfer of all time.
Yeah, I agree. The guy, started in '97 and he won the Masters tournament. His first major, I should say, that he won. He won it by 12 strokes, and then he just continued to be dominant from there on out. And obviously, he took some time off, or he was injured and didn't have some good years, and then won the Masters in 2019. That was pretty special. But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the guy, one of the only players ever to have an advantage before the ball was hit, just standing there on the tee box. And Tom also mentioned it. He really changed the game. And also, he was appointment television. I mean, every Sunday just seemed like, well, got to flip on golf because we got to watch Tiger. I mean, that was a thing that I did growing up, at least probably from the time I can remember until probably, until I went to college, 08, 09, and that's kind of where he kind of started trickling down. But, yeah, I think he's the greatest golfer ever.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about his career. It's kind of sort of like a tale of two careers, and again, part of it is the injuries and the age, but like you mentioned this, 97 to 08, he was the most dominant golfer. That's about a span of, 11 years there? I'm bad at math. 11, 12 years, and then from 09 to 2020, again 11, 12 years. It's been sort of the back half of his career. So I struggle. I mean, I think certainly in his prime, I think most people would take him over Jack. So it comes down to the age old, like, do you look at who is the best in their prime, or do you look at the totality of career? The same thing about Michael Jordan, LeBron James. I think when LeBron retires, he'll have the totality of career, but other people might say, I'm taking Jordan in his prime. And again, that's a hard argument to argue against. I do think Tiger has a special mystique, though. I think there's only one athlete in American history, and maybe two athletes in world history, that have the mystique of Tiger Woods. I think Michael Jordan in NBA, and I think Pele in soccer. Those are kind of names that are synonymous with the game. Like when you think of like golf, you think of Tiger. You think of soccer. I mean, I love Messi, but historically, people think of Pele. Same thing with basketball. You think of Michael Jordan. These guys have the it factor. They have a certain sort of mystique. And I think a lot of times in society, we're bred to hate on people. We hate on the champion. Like when someone messes up, we look to attack them. We had that with the Kobe Bryant sex scandal. I mean, we have that even with Tom Brady, and I'm perhaps one of the people attacking him. People are tired of him winning that. We have that with LeBron James. people are attacking LeBron James because of comparisons to Michael Jordan. But Tiger is so unique that, I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but as a whole, most people are actually cheering for him. I think the amount of sheer fan reaction he got, like that, it's one of the most iconic moments in sports I remember, and I'm not even a golf fan. The image of Tiger Woods walking down at the Masters and like hundreds of people rushing and running behind him. I mean, and I think people like a comeback story, and that's why that was so special to them. But he's got a sort of mystique, and if you look at him, like, he still seems like a model guy, but he's just made these mistakes. And I think people almost want to believe that, like, that's not the guys, and it's kind of hard to compare, but I think definitely he has the it factor, and he's the first name you think of when it comes to golf. No doubt about it. And hopefully a speedy recovery in the situation. Hopefully nothing too incriminating comes out. I believe initial reports, again, don't listen to anything I say. Take it, so much more investigation needs to be done. Initial reports do say that they didn't find any illegal substances, but there are some reports that he was speeding. So, again, we wish all the best. The images certainly look really bad, so it is good that he got out of there okay, and we'll see what happens with the rest of his golf career. Hopefully he's able to continue that. But on a more lighter note, it's time for my favorite segment of the week, Locks of the Week. And it was a pretty good week for the show last week. Again, after some rough weeks, rough stretches, it seems like our whole show, our whole team is coming together and performing much better with our Locks of the Week. 2-in-1 week for all three of us last week. I had the Raptors plus 6.5 against the Bucks. They won outright by 14. Lakers minus 2.5 over the Nets. I missed that game. The Lakers lost. And I had the Heat straight up over the Kings. They won by 8. Tom was 2-1. He had over 230 points, Lakers Nets. That went under. Bam Adebayo over 9.5 rebounds. He finished with 12. He had 9 in the first half. Joe Harris over 13.5 points. I thought I had written down, but I don't have written down what he finished with, but I know it was much over 13.5. Mm-hmm. And Drew, of course, as usual, hit English Premier League soccer under. He had Leeds United Wolves under 2.5. Wolves wins 1-0. I believe he's something like 10-11 and 1 or 2. He's maybe had one loss and a tie. He always gets those right. Not as lucky with the Bundesliga. He really seems to mess up there. Freiburg Union Berlin over 2.5 goals. It was only a 1-0 win for Berlin. And finally, Atletico Madrid Levante under 2.5 goals. It was 2-0 Levante with a major upset in that game, getting 2-0 win. But, of course, Drew just cared that it went under. That actually went well under. They scored a goal in the last minute of the game to make it 2-0. So it wasn't one of those situations where he was sweating it out. Drew basically knew he hadn't won the whole game. I'm sure he was definitely keeping his eyes on that La Liga match. Were you watching, Drew?
Oh, at BN Sports. No, I was not.
You weren't listening to Ray Hudson, the best announcer of all time, doing the
I was not.
Magisterial. This is how Ray Hudson described Messi. They follow him on Twitter, and he comes out on Facebook. Just legendary commentary. It's one of those things where you don't even have to like the sport. You can just tune in to listen to Ray, and it's worth it.
Oh, sure.
So, Castleman.
You got to tell Castleman that, not me.
Yeah, make you a Ray Hudson fan, Tom.
That would require me watching.
All right.
Not interested.
What do you guys got locks of the week, Drew? What's going on in the EPL this week?
Yeah, so, I'm going to go back to the hockey. Wednesday, NHL, Carolina at Tampa Bay. That's going over 6 goals in that game. I'll go also on Wednesday, the NBA, Lakers at the Jazz. Take the over 219.5 points. No Anthony Davis, no defense. Take the over in that contest. And then the EPL on Sunday, Leicester City and Arsenal. That game will go under 2.5 goals.
Well, how did you say that, team?
Leicester?
It's Leicester, buddy. They only won a couple years ago. Honestly, the biggest upset in the history of the Premier League.
Yeah, I remember.
Box of the week, that's the team that pays out. So, yeah, Leicester.
Yeah, take their under. Okay, Leicester City and Arsenal under 2.5 goals.
Wonderful. Can you name the star player on Leicester City?
I can barely name the star player on the Jazz, so no, I cannot.
Jamie Vardy? Are you kidding me?
Oh, Vardy. Okay.
Tom,
no
what do you
clue
got?
for me.
No clue. What do you have?
All right.
He's going to have a bunch of NBA props.
Let's get prop bets tonight.
So here are your NBA prop bets for this evening. I don't think that people are going to get this in time, but the game starts in 20 minutes from now, so it's going to count for me on the week. Knicks Warriors, give me RJ Barrett over 24.5 on his PRA. That is total points, rebounds, and assists combined. Over 24.5 for him tonight. Trailblazers and Nuggets later on this evening. I like Nikola Jokic over 44.5 for his PRA. His current PRA is 46.2 if you add up his average points, rebounds, and assists, so a little bit of value there. Paul Millsap is out. J. Michael Green is day-to-day, so he should get plenty of runtime on the floor in the front court. And then I'm kind of going back and forth if I want to double dip on his over for rebounds, but I'll go with Jamal Murray over 24.5 points. Portland is 29th in defensive efficiency, so I'm looking for Jamal Murray to go kind of head-to-head with Damian Lillard, put up a bunch of points tonight, 24.5 for him.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a bonus pick that doesn't count for my locks of the week, but it's a bonus pick. And since I was eyeing it and decided against it, but since you're hammering that Nuggets-Blazers game, I'm going to give people more reason to watch it because I'm going to post the show online, and someone will watch this, and they'll see all our bets on this game. I'll give you another. Since it's my homer picks of the week, I'm going to go with former Mizzou Tiger Michael Porter Jr. over 13.5 points in the game tonight. You mentioned several guys out for the Nuggets. He's their number 3 scoring option going up against a poor offensive team. I like him getting 14 or more points, but that doesn't count towards my picks. That's my bonus. Homer pick number 1 tonight. We're going to go Mizzou minus 3.5 over Ole Miss. Take this with a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure every time I've picked Mizzou, they've lost this season, but we're going to go for it. Why not? Tigers 8-2 at home, 5-4 on the road. This is a home game. Mizzou much better at home. They were on a 3-game losing streak without their big man Jeremiah Tillman in the middle. He comes back last game. They won 93-78. The offensive rhythm looked much better. Ole Miss did beat Mizzou earlier this season at Ole Miss, but I look for the Tigers to get revenge in Columbia with Jeremiah Tillman possibly getting a double-double. Mizzou winning by more than 4 in that game, 4 or more. Then more homer picks. As a Mizzou guy, you got to pick against Kansas, so why not? Texas minus 2.5 over Kansas in college hoops tonight. Texas won at Allen Fieldhouse by 25 earlier this season. Are you kidding me? Yes. Kansas is much better now. Yes, Kansas is like a 4-game winning streak. They're playing much better, but I don't think they're playing 21 points better or 22 points better if I'm doing the math. I think it'll be a close game, but I think Texas wins by 3 or more. Look for Courtney Ramey to hit some big threes. Very good three-point shooter there for the Longhorns. And my final homer pick of the week, I'm going Barcelona Soccer, my favorite team, Lionel Messi. They've been so up and down this season, coming off 2 bad games, losing to PSG. Somehow tying 1-1 against Cadiz, newly promoted team. Somehow this year they tied Cadiz and they lost to Cadiz. I don't know how it happened. I'm expecting a big Barcelona win, but I looked at the line. It was minus 2.5 against Elche, one of the last teams in the league. I thought that line was really big, so I decided to go for the over 3.5 goals instead. I see a 3-1 win for Barcelona. Maybe it's 4-1, but I felt more confident in the over total as opposed to them winning by 3 goals. Lionel Messi now tied for the leading goal scorer in La Liga with Luis Suarez, his best friend and former teammate that Barcelona got rid of for who knows why. So Messi gets 2 goals. Barca wins 3-1. They cover over 3.5. And that's a noon game tomorrow on Wednesday. Plenty of time to get that bet in. Maybe bet big if you want. Not quite a mortgage bet, but I feel pretty good about it. So we should know by tomorrow about 2 o'clock how I finish. Castleman will know tonight. And Drew will have to wait till the weekend because of the English Premier League.
Feeling good about all this stuff.
What day is that game? I might watch that one.
Which game?
Leicester City and Arsenal?
That's on Sunday.
Oh, okay. I'll put it on my to-watch list.
I think it's really early in the morning. I think it's about 6:15 Cayman time. So.
Oh, boy.
Unless you're still up from the night before, but I don't think you do that anymore.
Not as much. I've been waking up a little earlier, but that is a little early. If it was Manchester City against, well, not Liverpool, they're bad now. Maybe Man City against Man U, maybe I'd get up for it. Although
wow.
Man City, Man U tend to play a lot of these 0-0 games, so those games never meet the hype.
I'll mark that down then.
Okay.
As my next under pick when they play.
Yeah, it's probably a good pick. Salute statements of the week, guys. What do we have? Tom Castleman?
All right, so we just moved out of locks of the week, but I'm going to stick with a little bit of an over-under theme here with pitchers and catchers reporting, and spring training is just about in full swing. My statement of the week is really more of a statement of an entire season. The Chicago White Sox have their over-under win total listed at 90.5. Yeah, that seems like a high number. But I'm going to go over on that, and I'm going to go over and say that the White Sox will be representing the American League in the Fall Classic. I'm all in buying whatever the White Sox are selling, including this hoodie that my dad got me for Christmas. Brand new. I needed some new swag, so wearing that for the statement of the week, of course. The White Sox have starting pitching. They have a phenomenal bullpen, young offense, good defense. Still have a couple of acquisitions or holes on the roster that I would have liked them to fill, but really looking good to me. The Yankees are the only team in the American League with a higher win total for the season that you can bet on. So I think they gained some experience from an abbreviated playoffs last year. I think they are confident and they are ready to take the American League by storm.
Real quick, the Yankees are the favorite. They haven't made the World Series since 2009. I know Drew doesn't watch baseball as much as he used to, but he's a Yankees fan, so certainly would love to see the White Sox dethrone the Yankees there. I will have a follow-up for you, Tom Castleman. I know you were very low on the Tony La Russa hire, so despite the Tony La Russa hire, you're feeling very high on the White Sox making the World Series.
My issues with the Tony La Russa hire are more for off-the-field issues than in the dugout issues. I mean, that could carry over, but I'm going to go with talent winning on this one in baseball, and that baseball managers don't matter all that much.
Well, La Russa's more of an old-school guy. He might not use the analytics that you love as much.
They've got people around him for that, from what I'm understanding. Okay. They're kind of insulating him.
All right. Hey, man, I'm good with the White Sox making the World Series. I'm all for it. I would love a Cubs White Sox World Series, but the Cubs are trending downwards a little bit.
We may have missed the window on that.
Might have missed the window. All right.
We missed the window. We flat out missed the window.
Flat out missed the window. But we'll see. We'll see. The Cubs have a lot of guys who are basically playing on contract years this year. I think Chris Bryant is one of them. A few others. I don't remember the list off the top of my head, but there could be some extra motivation. I think certainly Chris Bryant, a guy that's been injured the last couple of years, maybe he gets health in the offseason, maybe he has a big season, maybe things look better for the Cubs. I mean, this was a playoff team last year. They also got Jake Arrieta back. Maybe he has a bounce-back season on the mound. Certainly would love to see that. I do think the Dodgers are, though, a pretty safe bet to come out of the National League. In fact, win the whole thing. Real quick, I would be remiss to mention Australian Open last week. I predicted both the champs right. What happened to your guy, Daniil Medvedev, Drew? I thought you picked him to get the upset against Novak, and Tom, you actually picked Tsitsipas to beat Medvedev. You were wrong there. So, guys, did not go well with your tennis picks.
No, I went with the tennis upset player du jour, and I liked how his name sounded, so I was like, yeah, I'll pick him.
Yeah, I mean, Medvedev just ran out of gas, in the final, and it was all Novak.
Straight set win. Castleman's fun fact about Tsitsipas, he's Greek, that borders my homeland of Bulgaria. We have a lot of similar foods and traditions, so I'm all for the pick. It just didn't work out your way. I think you probably failed to realize that he came back and beat a 5-set match against Nadal that's kind of tiring on the body, but nonetheless.
No, I knew all that. I was just rolling with an upset because it felt a little boring to pick Novak.
Fair enough.
Novak, Djokovic.
Novak, yeah. He's now at 18 majors, just 2 back of Federer and Nadal, and it seems like inevitable that he will pass those 2 legends. Drew, what do you have for your statement of the week, salute of the week? You'll probably give us like a really quick salute, then a really quick.
Nope, going to the hardwood for my statement of the week. Watch out for the Phoenix Suns come playoff time. They're currently in 4th place in the West, in a tie for 4th place. I guess 4th place in the Western Conference. They've won 3 in a row. They've won 9 out of their last 10 games. Devin Booker playing well this season, almost averaging about 25 points. He's shooting 50% from the field. And then Chris Paul, the veteran point guard, also a leader on that team. And then DeAndre Ayton, of course, the young man in the middle. So those trio of guys, watch out for the Suns. They've been playing well, and I could see them making a run in the playoffs. Of course, in the bubble last season, I think they went undefeated. So they were hot coming into this season, and certainly in 4th place right now, they're playing well.
Guess who picked them to make the Western Conference Finals after our overreaction like a couple weeks into the season?
Apparently you.
Yeah, man. You're actually on the same page. I'm all aboard the Suns, by the way. I don't buy the Jazz. I don't buy the Clippers. Give me a Suns-Lakers Western Conference Finals. We're on the same page here.
Sure, I'd be fine with that.
We see that every once in a while. Drew and I agree. It happens.
That's a first.
That's a first. Maybe a second. My statement of the week, you can find this full video online. I don't know if you guys saw it, but basically at a camp, Cam Newton, there was, I think it's a high school kid, maybe it was middle school, I think it was high school, a young kid nonetheless, basically was kind of trying to smack talk Cam Newton, talking back to Cam Newton. My message for the young athletes, respect your elders. Cam Newton might have had a tough season this year, but Cam Newton won the Heisman, won the MVP. He's had a very good career. Maybe not quite Hall of Fame level, which I predicted after 1 game into his career. I might miss that pick, but nonetheless, he's had a pretty good career. I predicted that on our college radio show, which then spurned the making of this show. So, but I did do much better with my Stephen Curry Hall of Fame prediction only a couple years into his career, well before he was making the finals. So I'll take a 1 for 2 on that one, unless Newton really has a revival late in his career, which you never know. Athletes play to an older age these days. But nonetheless, Cam Newton's not a scrub. He had an off year, but even if you were a scrub, if you're a starting quarterback in the NFL, there's 32 starting quarterbacks in the National Football League. Even if you're the 32nd of 32, you're really good at football. You made the pros. As Cam Newton said in the video, I'm rich. You're making millions. You know a lot about the positions. I mean, there's literally thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids who try to be a quarterback, dream of being a quarterback in the National Football League, and you have one that has done it for so many years and has won an MVP. This kid at the camp needs to learn to respect his elders. And as a society, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we want to hate on people that are successful, and we call out these professional athletes. We say they're a bum, whatever. But I don't know if you guys saw this a couple years ago. Brian Scalabrine, the former backup player in the NBA, he played on the Bulls briefly, one of the last guys off the bench, and he played a bunch of random people in pickup basketball, and he was beating them like 21-1, 21-2, and that's because he wasn't even trying some of the time on defense. So it's just a reminder of how good these professional athletes are. And if you're a kid who, you dream of making the pros, it may not happen, but at the very least, like, if you can get yourself a college scholarship or even to play in college, take every pointer and every lesson you can from any professional athlete, because what's the stat of, 1% of kids go on to play college sports? Well, it's like 0.001 that go on to the NFL. I hope this young kid learns from this. Since this is viral, I don't know that much about him, but this could actually hurt him going forward in his recruiting. And let this be a lesson to all the other young kids out there. If you attend a football camp, don't try and make some funny remarks to the professional players there. Instead, take notes, listen, and learn.
Yeah, I certainly hope it doesn't have any adverse effects on him. As there's a little bit of like kids will be kids type of thing, and like he was chirping a little bit. He was trying to get a little bit of internet fame there, and from what I could tell, actually later on in the camp, Cam Newton addressed that, and you're right. It's one of those things where it's like, what do they call the doctor? Or I just ruined the punchline to the joke, but what do they call the person who graduates with the lowest score from medical school? Doctor. Like, it's still a great achievement to get there. And yeah, you can learn some things, plus just, like you said, the outright respect. But hopefully not too many adverse effects for this young man. I mean, that's a dumb mistake. I mean, we all do dumb mistakes at times, but certainly pretty innocuous, a little bit of trash talk. It's not like he, did something dangerous or anything like that. So hopefully, he doesn't have any adverse effects going on. And it could be a valuable lesson going forward. I'm hoping for the best.
I wasn't a fan of it, but I hope so. You're right. And Cam Newton actually handled himself pretty well in that video. I know Cam Newton's kind of one of those personalities that has mixed results. I actually think he's kind of gotten a hard shake for many things. I mean, he likes to dress a big game, and I think when he's dressing up a big game and he's not performing, you get more hate come your way. But nonetheless, I hope that it is a valuable lesson for the kid to learn. Anywho, that does it for Salute Your Sports Week 20. We're going to have a special show next week. We're going to give our NBA midseason awards. We're also going to break down college basketball tournament week coming up. We'll have all our picks, plus we'll look at our preseason picks as to who were the regular season college champions, and so much more to come on Salute Your Sports in the weeks to come. Have a good day, everyone.